Coming up, training camp continues. We have some bright spots for young players, maybe some signs of concerns for certain positions, and also a little bit of clarity around who may call the plays on the offensive side of the ball. Coming up next. Oh, how are you, friends? It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, we are your hosts over here, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Locked On Nets podcast, covering the Brooklyn Nets with my boy, Doug Norrie. And over there, you're going to see him, the healthy, the wealthy, the wise, the seasoned generational ticket holder, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
Adam, I love the intro today. It was very like Ron Burgundy-esque almost. It was like, oh, hello, didn't see you there, listeners. Like, how are we doing today?
And thanks for stopping by. Yeah, listen, sometimes I catch myself off guard, even though you would think that we're running a tight ship over here. I don't even know when I'm on the podcast. I do it so frequently. I'm constantly talking about some sport, one side or the other, that I just assume I'm always on air.
I love it. I love it. Well, there's a lot to talk about today. There's
Yeah.
a lot going on with Giants training camp and a lot of good vibes, a lot of interesting vibes, some things, the good, the bad. And there we had the facts of life. Adam, where do you want to start with training camp? Do you want to talk high level about the vibes and the energy? Do you want to talk about the nitty gritty? Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I think the good news from a Giants fan perspective is you just want to feel like, and you're going to get these, generally speaking, when you get a new regime, you're going to get glowing reviews from all the players. Everyone's excited. You're going to try to pluck out some of the bright spots over the course of training camp. But in general, you want to have a sense that things feel like it's everybody's on board moving in the right direction. And some things, like having Dable be the new head coach and getting into training camp, it's like the first little fun tidbit. Why they're playing a little young Joker out there on the field as everyone gets warmed up, and you see Kadarius Toney coming out, and he's all smiles. And people said this over on social media. When Kadarius Toney has a big smile on his face, it's an infectious visual to him being out there on the field and working out. Big contrast, as we say, from last season and where this team was heading into another year of Joe Judge, another year of uncertainty, and certainly from the perspective of what the anticipation was on both sides of the football, really, because the coaching staff remained the same. You kind of went in saying, well, how much can this improve? Right. I mean, Jason Garrett wasn't going to all of a sudden become a different coach, not even knocking him. Same thing with Joe Judge. He wasn't going to just flip his personality. Now with Dable, with Kafka, with Wink Martindale, we feel like things can look different. And that's what we've been seeing over these first few days. Things look different on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, Dabes went on to say basically like, some people like the music, some don't. Others like it more than whatever. He said, no matter what, he is talented though. And it's a simple little nod to say, hey, like we're gonna make sure we support our players. What I will say is, listen, I'm not gonna say that players weren't for Joe Judge. Like, people like Logan Ryan and others were ready to run through a brick wall for
Sure.
Joe Judge. What I think happened for Joe Judge was we all kind of soured as fans, and the media started souring on him. And the icing on the cake is when you're running 2 QB sneaks later on in the season and you've basically given up all hope on the offensive side of the ball. It's like that's when you lose everybody and it's completely gone. Of course, like you mentioned, when a whole new regime comes in, new GM, new head coach, there's just a different vibe to it. And you're starting to see each other feel things out, what's acceptable, what's not, what's the tone that's being set. But early on, it does seem like there is a very loose, upbeat tempo that everybody has.
Yeah, 100%. And, Kadarius Toney's been a bright spot already in camp. He's made a couple of really nice catches on the offensive side of the ball. Ones where you go, this is what we talked about yesterday. Okay, the measurables, you're not gonna jump off the paper on you and go, oh my God, watch out for this guy, right? But then you see him and it's the athleticism visually that takes over for you, playing on the outside, making some great catches. I'll even say, I think this goes back to the first day of full training camp. He made a catch over Aaron Robinson in the end zone, real high extension, full grab. Even though he caught that, I thought my takeaway was because we already know what Kadarius Toney can do. I thought, you know what though, Aaron Robinson was right there. He was draped all over him. He came down with it, but he was draped all over him. Just in terms of bright spots at a high level, Darnell Holmes has been the other name that's been consistently getting mentioned here over the first couple of days of camp as well. Had another interception of Daniel Jones. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I thought about that in terms of both Wink Martindale and Dable overall. This idea of we want guys going out there, we want them playing at full speed, we want them making mistakes, learning from it, correcting it, and improving. And it looks like Darnell Holmes, maybe that little bit of freedom, right? Maybe that little bit of, hey, you can cut loose here if you want to, is allowing him to play a little bit more aggressively, to try to jump a couple of routes early in camp. And that's a good confidence boost for a guy that, as we said, when we talk about the depth chart, he does factor in potentially to be a very big contributor if he can prove that he's capable of doing it underneath Wink.
Well, we all thought that when Cordell Flott was drafted, that he immediately was going to take over the slot position, and that Darnay Holmes may fall down the depth chart a little bit, thinking, Aaron Robinson may play outside. There was a whole host of things. Darnay Holmes has come out and he's played with that aggressive mentality that you just mentioned. It's almost interesting. It's like some of the zone read stuff that Patrick Graham was doing kind of had him back on his heels a little bit, trying to diagnose what is happening. Now they're telling him to be ultra aggressive and use his athleticism. It's one of those things where I'm like, whoa, like, were we missing something with Darnay Holmes in terms of the best way to utilize him? Because over the first couple of days, Adam, he looks like a little bit of a different player.
Well, and that's, it's fascinating about going from Patrick Graham to Wink Martindale, right? And just going from one regime to the next, where you feel like last year and even under the previous regime, it was about not making any mistakes and trying to maybe avoid them to the detriment of using your natural talent, your natural athleticism, or letting guys kind of go a little bit more free reign. We're not overreading into anything. There's a sentiment around what Wink Martindale is as a defensive coordinator. But I do think when you look across the roster on either side of the ball, it's going to be, what do you do really well? Let's go have you do that, right? Like, take off the restrictions on these players. And that's really as much for the players, I think, as for the coaching staff. We need to learn when we're playing full tilt and you are allowed to just kind of let your natural talents take over the play. Do you make more mistakes when we do that, right? Are you more mistake prone in those situations? Are you, maybe Darnay Holmes is more inclined to let those natural instincts say, I think I see that route, I'm going to go for the undercut here. And what's fascinating is we can turn it over then to the deeper portion of the secondary, where we also got a glimpse of some 3 safety sets where we had Julian Love and Xavier McKinney playing deep, and then Dane Belton down in the box. Did I say that the right way, or did I just reverse that order? Yeah.
Flip it. They actually had Julian Love and Xavier McKinney down in the box with Dane Belton playing back center field. One of those exciting things. While Wink does like to play the single high safety quite a bit, he's saying, well, yeah, we'll have one safety back there, but maybe we use the other safeties as guys that are going to be blitzing off the edge, almost like a linebacker, right?
And not, well, yeah, and even in a layer further, I think, is we're also going to be using our best players that we have available to us, right?
Right.
Xavier McKinney is going to be the leader, we hope, on the defensive side of the ball, and he's the most talented guy in that secondary. Hey, he's not coming off the field for any reason. And then if you go the layer deeper, and we know we're really big fans of Dane Belton, it's like, well, how do we get him on the field and probably put him in a spot where, again, let him just kind of free range out there, see the whole field, and make some reactive and instinctual plays. Let's put him deep, right? Let's let him survey the field and see if he can come up to help in coverage, help down in the box, etc. And then, as we said last episode, Julian Love, I think if we're talking about versatility, whatever his ceiling is, he has had experience in the nickel, playing down in the box. He's played at safety. So now you're maybe getting this opportunity again to say, how do we mix and match and just utilize the best players that we have available to us, understanding the secondary group. As we said, Darnay Holmes, maybe he's popping up here a little bit. Okay, but it's Aaron Robinson, it's Darnay Holmes, it's Adoree Jackson, and then it's interest, it's questions, it's curiosities. So whatever Julian Love is, you want to maximize his value when we could either be a move away or this could be what we go into the season with.
And the idea with Azeez Ojulari being out and uncertainty who's going to be starting, it looks like
it's a good opportunity. Yeah.
Right. And alongside Blake Martinez, you have Tay Crowder on the inside. This is the time to use some of those exotic looks to see if some of these other guys can pan out. That's why bringing Julian Love in the box, Xavier McKinney, can Dane Belton play center field in a situation like that? You know that you're going to have Azeez Ojulari primarily getting after the quarterback. But when he's not there, let's see and give some other people some reps if we could get creative so that they don't know what's coming when Azeez Ojulari is out there, along with Julian Love, McKinney, and Belton. Then you're like, where is the pressure going to be coming from?
Yeah, and I think that's what you want to kind of develop here in training camp. And as we head towards that August 11th first preseason game against the Patriots, the communication level too, right? These are, if Julian Love is going to be a potential leader for the defense because he has experience, he's been around the NFL, he's one of the longest tenured players for the Giants in a lot of regards. You need to know that Julian Love to Xavier McKinney to Dane Belton and everything in between, that they can instinctually understand where one is going to be playing, right? if it breaks X, I need to know that McKinney can go for it and Belton's going to fall back and pick up that coverage point, or vice versa, right? So I think that that's a lot of what we're hoping to see over training camp is communication on both sides of the ball, right? An understanding of where we want to be as a unit and then the opportunities that we have individually. And I'm fascinated to watch that as it unfolds. When we talk about then another bright spot there on the defensive side of the ball, before we flip over to maybe, let's say concerning, but just something that you obviously have to be watching, Dexter Lawrence was having a whale of a day for himself. And this will thread us over to the offensive side because there was an absentee on the offensive line for Big Blue. But Dexter Lawrence was living in the backfield. And I think that's something that we said, like this kid, this guy that we love, needs to start being talked about like that more frequently in order to be successful long term.
And think about what it means for the Giants if he can get pressure
Yeah.
inside
Yep.
one-on-one. It creates so many matchup nightmares when you talk about Thibodeau and Ojulari on the outside and then pressure from the secondary. It's like if you have Xavier McKinney, Thibodeau, Ojulari, Leonard Williams, and Dexter Lawrence all with the ability to get into the backfield, like that creates havoc. Like where can you chip block? Where can you double team from an offensive line perspective? It's clearly giving the Giants offensive line a little bit of frustrations early on in camp. I will say it is a little bit concerning that we heard similar things last year and the pass rush wasn't very good last year. And it ended up proving out that the offensive line still needed a bunch of work. We're hoping that that's not the case
Right.
moving forward. You know,
Not only
the good of the defensive front, but the bad situation where the offense seemed to take a little bit of a step back today.
Yeah, not only did it turn out that training camp was a bit of a mirage when it came to the defensive front, then it also turned out, though, but you can take to the bank how bad the offensive line was going to be. One last note on Dexter Lawrence, I think it's important, too. With Blake Martinez coming back and getting healthy, pressure up the middle matters, too, being disruptive in the middle of the offensive line for the opposition, because then Blake Martinez, who we know is a tackling machine and a run stuffer, we want you to be able to occupy, right? We want you to be able to blow up that initial wave there and then let Blake Martinez be, Blake Martinez to me, it's like he's the secondary bulldozer. And that's what you want, right? If you have Dexter Lawrence pushing that pocket and then Blake Martinez coming in with his second wave, yeah, we would think the speed that you've introduced with Thibodeau and with Dame Belton and hopefully Xavier McKinney taking that next step and Ojulari, now it's, hey, when you start to scramble, we can push you back into that pocket. We can collapse this thing around you. I think far too often, with so many of the struggles across this line, and Leonard Williams is obviously put in there as well, but with so many struggles across this defensive front, a lot of times, even when you got the one angle of pressure off the edge, yeah, but the center of the pocket was perfectly safe to step up and make a nice throw, or the other side of the line was going to be easy to get out of the pocket, make a play on the run. You need to have this first, second, and third wave of impact for the opposition in order to avoid those situations. And we like to think that we want to see more of that, and hopefully it's not just a myth, as we know Feliciano was not out there for the Giants offensive line.
Well, I think that's the noteworthy piece. John Feliciano was not out there because of heat exhaustion, hydration today, needed to get settled. So when we talk about Dexter Lawrence coming up the middle and getting into the backfield, it means that there is going to be a big battle for that backup center position. We talked about Ben Bredesen. We don't know if Nick Gates is going to be healthy. There's a whole host of ideas. I mentioned the idea back before about Shane Lemieux sliding over and putting a Zudu at guard. Knowing that Feliciano, if it continues down the same path where either he's not out there or we realize there's nothing behind him, the Giants may need to reconfigure their plans in the middle of that offensive line moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, let's be realistic here. If it comes to pass, that what that sounds similar to when Nick Gates went down with an injury last year, right? And all of a sudden you go, what are we going to do? Yeah, we want to have contingency plans, but if you start talking about Shane Lemieux moves over, and then we're high on Azudu, but if you have to thrust Azudu into a starting role, week one, and he's not quite there yet, we get back into that whirlwind. I think you had mentioned though, and I'm going to forget who it was. Maybe it'll be on the tip of your tongue. The veteran center that maybe going out and signing would potentially make sense for the Giants at the right price point. We can always circle back to that next week. We talked about this going back a couple of weeks where it was, hey, go ahead.
JC Treader, I believe it was.
Yep. There, that idea is interesting. If if it means, hey, if we bring him in, is it automatically that Feliciano is not the starting center? Maybe that's not as enticing for the Giants regime and the coaching staff, but something like that, because nobody right now, outside of really shuffling the deck here, nothing excites me if someone were to go down. So they've done a good job. They've started to develop some of that depth there, but we know, and this is true of most teams, you lose one key piece on your offensive line, it's going to have a trickle down effect. One place we're not going to have a trickle down effect though, Andy.
Well, let me just transition this for you before we start talking about Daniel Jones, because I think that's
no. I wasn't going to.
Well, I know. Before we talk about him,
no.
Oh, all
I'm
right,
not
fine,
scratching with you.
fine, Adam. Whatever. What I wanted to talk about was something that is noticeable. Having fans back there after some COVID years and everyone being
Mm,
there in person. There's something that every single person seems to be saying. Andrew Thomas is 6'5", 315 pounds. He is a very, very large offensive tackle, Adam. And
sure.
the only thing people keep saying is how enormous Evan Neal looks. Like,
That's what I was
no,
gonna say.
I yeah, but I wanted to say it because it sounds way cooler coming from me.
That's fair.
6'7",
Hey,
351 pounds. He is
sure.
a mountain of a man. And
Mhm.
a lot of the beat writers, a lot of reporters are saying like a first round draft pick having this like sheer size and body coming right out of college is incredible. And it makes it feel like the Giants, albeit not the sexiest pick, taking an offensive tackle in the top 10, it feels like the stability that they're going to have on the outside with
Mhm.
Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas feels pretty good to start with.
Now, oddly enough, just tip of the hat across the stadium there for the New York Jets, who looks like Mekhi Becton is trying to lose some weight. They told him just go play right tackle, like they don't want to worry about left tackle. It doesn't. Just this would be pound for pound the biggest combined right tackles in New York football history. Right, put these two guys
Oh,
next
yeah.
to each other. No, he is. He's enormous. It looks like he's doing. It looks like he's coming in and completely looking the part for what you want as an offensive lineman, and certainly anchoring the right side of that offensive line. You have to be excited about it. The funny thing, I guess I'll say, is, and we haven't heard anything, nothing negative. It is what it is, right? You're going through these reps. I'll tie it back to the Feliciano piece, though. It's like Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal are playing perfect football. Great. Turns out, though, if you're a leaky sieve up the middle, it's not going to matter how good those ends are. So I do want to hear for both of these players, a rookie, as we talked about the Madden ratings, take them for whatever they're worth. But when we're talking about these players, you have to realize that there are expectations here. In order for this team to be successful in whatever iteration, however far they can go this year, Andrew Thomas needs to keep building on what he's done. And Evan Neal needs to, like, Evan Neal can't have a Andrew Thomas rookie year, right? If he has that, then all of a sudden, it doesn't mean he can't be good long term, but we got to kind of push the big pause button on what the progression of this offense can be. So he needs to come in and obviously hit the ground running. Additionally, though, we talk about the offensive side of the football, talk about that wide receiver room. We've mentioned Darius Slayton before. He took some reps at punt returns as well. It looks like he's just being asked to do anything and everything that you possibly can to contribute. And the reason maybe why, as we had also speculated, where is he in the hierarchy? Well, one, Richie James is another name to go with Darnell Holmes that has been getting a lot of buzz over the start of training camp, seems to be checking all the boxes, not only as a special teamer, but also as an offensive weapon out of the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, he's 5'9", so he's not the largest wide receiver that we have out there.
I'm
But
5'9", and I crush podcasting.
yes, and I don't think you'd make a good outside wide receiver. So we'll
Yeah.
just, I mean, we stick to what we're good at. And what
Sure.
he's good at is being very shifty, very quick, getting in and out of breaks very quickly, and
That's right.
being able to make explosive plays happen. And you can see, like, we all knocked the idea that Richie James had a higher Madden rating than half of the other wide receivers in our room. But
Rightfully
he is
so.
a name that everyone keeps talking about in camp. Like, they're surprised at how well he's progressing and how well he's excelling. And it's a really difficult situation because it feels like every time Richie James gets praise, people have to bump Darius Slayton down because
Right.
there's a pecking order of wide receivers, and it's unfortunate. And Darius Slayton had a drop or two here or there, hasn't had the blow it out start that you would hope it would be. But a positive note is Richie James looks like a guy that's saying, I want to make this roster, and I will do it whether it's kick returns, punt returns, or being the fourth or fifth wide receiver, in the slot.
And I said this when he came into camp, right? When they had some of these signings, I looked at Richie James, understanding what he has or has not shown as an NFL player. But I thought, yeah, again, inside of the Mike Kafka system, inside of the Brian Dable system, this guy can have value. And the thing on Darius Slayton and all these wide receivers, we said this, he's a fifth round pick, right? He's a fifth round pick. And I think the reason why, when you say Richie James looked good and that means Darius Slayton is bad, it's because we spent a couple of seasons getting really excited, and justifiably, because Darius Slayton kind of had this breakout first season with the Giants where you start to dream on maybe they had a steal in the NFL draft. He's coming back down to earth a little bit, but that's what he is. And it's been some people on over on Twitter have been speculating about, boy, a few more drops for Darius Slayton, and you better believe he's going to get traded. Listen, reality check, everybody. A few more drops for Darius Slayton and he'll get cut, right? Like, nobody is trading for a guy that isn't showing up in training camp for $2.5 million. they'll just wait it out and then maybe take a flyer on him. And that's okay. I still think that he can stick around. I like hearing that Richie James looks good. It means that the turnover and the new style of system, it's going to breed competition. We haven't heard much about CJ Board to this point. Someone that's a holdover that we wouldn't hate seeing stick around on the roster. But if Richie James is the new CJ Board, so be it, right? There's 5, 6, 7 names inside this wide receiver group that I'm happy with any of them. And I won't be surprised any of those guys that don't end up making the team or end up getting moved, etc.
Yeah, the simple answer, Richie James was a 7th-round pick of the Titans in 2018. Darius Slayton was a recent pick of the Giants in the 5th round. Once you're in the league for a couple of years, when you're looking to complement the back end of that roster, it's always nice for us to keep guys that we draft, but it's pretty simple. If Richie James provides more depth and more versatility and flexibility in the return game and special teams, he's gonna make a scene on this roster. And that's perfectly fine and all good. And that is one of the positives. I think Richie James and Darnell Holmes are two people on top of Kadarius Toney where things have been positive. Where this ultimately always will go, and it will go for the entire preseason and for the regular season, is it just feels like this entire thing falls squarely on the progression of Daniel Jones. And we hear that Darnell Holmes picked him off again in practice today. He picked him off yesterday. He had a couple of different turnovers, in terms of picks. And so I'm starting to wonder if, we talk about Dayball saying, hey, we want him to make mistakes, right, Adam? Like we want him to see what's possible. Where are you at early on in camp? Because you've heard some really good things, some high throws to Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney, and then some bad things with the interceptions to Darnell Holmes.
Yeah, going back over the last couple of days, there was a progression route that Kenny Golladay ran across the middle, generally leading up the field. Nice, I'll say nice connection. I'm not here to nitpick training camp. Like, let's be clear, we're going to build up towards the preseason, where I think maybe we'll see more Daniel Jones at the quarterback spot than you would normally for a lot of teams in preseason because it matters more in this new system. But some of the highlights, though, when you hear wide receiver makes phenomenal catch, that can sometimes also be correlated to not the perfect throw, right? Yesterday's practice, offense struggled quite a bit and then finished strong, where I think Daniel Jones completed 7 consecutive passes. However, the bulk of those passes were the underneath, the shorter routes, right? So there's this push and pull about what I can judge right now. You're 100% right that everything we're going to watch is Daniel Jones looking good, right? Because we have this idea of the new pre-snap motion, guys are moving around, Wan'Dale Robinson getting a rep out of the backfield, out of the running back position. There's so much opportunity for this offense to be dynamic, but we know it's going to come down to Daniel Jones because, it's interesting when you think about the offensive schemes for Dable and for Kafka and what that influence is going to look like. And just a quick aside, we've heard that it looks like Kafka is in line. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. If he's calling the plays as we work our way into preseason and things are going well, I think that the general consensus is Dable will keep his hands off and let him do its thing so he can have this overall view. That's a positive. I remember going back to Kansas City that they're the kind of team that it doesn't matter if it succeeds on first down or on second down, then it's third and long, and then bang, the big play, right? It's kind of, we take it any way that we get it because we're dynamic and explosive. So maybe that mitigates my concern around being a on-time offense, right? Staying ahead of the downs and distances so much. But Daniel Jones, like, we know, right? This is his audition to be a franchise quarterback. Every time that he doesn't look so good or misses a throw or doesn't quite get there, I get Dable saying, grip it and rip it. We want you to make mistakes and learn from them. It's also the Giants organization getting the sample size of saying, when we cut him loose, guess what? Either the mistakes get worse or the big plays and some of the things that we were excited about with him get that much better. That's what they're trying to find out here in training camp.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say on the Daniel Jones piece is I think it's fascinating that he struggles in the red zone or so with some of these shorter slant routes or shorter passes to get outside. It feels like there's something a little bit off with his timing because we know when he's had time in the pocket and he has the ability to throw the ball downfield, he looks tremendous. Like he throws a great deep ball. It's not just a biased opinion saying that. There are metrics back from 2019 and 2020 that he was one of the top 3 best throwers of the football.
But when it gets congested,
a little congested and there's a little bit of traffic and he has to make that quick, move, that seems to be where the mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to continue to stay positive. It is positive that you're getting the ball to the playmakers behind the line of scrimmage or very quickly out in space to let them do what they need to do. We also need to hope that this offensive line can hold up so that the vertical threat is there, and maybe that expands the defense a little bit more so it doesn't feel as congested for some of these routes that Bellinger and guys in the slot are going to have to make.
Yeah, and I think, again, if we're talking about things we're watching for, we're not casting any judgments here. He threw a pick, nobody cares. But the progression you want to see is as Wink Martindale over the course of camp and preseason in practices starts to push a little bit more pressure, because that instinctual 3-step drop, get out of your hands quick. Well, how do you react when you see that Xavier McKinney, that Julian Love, that Dane Belton is ready to jump that route, that Darnell Holmes is ready to jump that quick route? You have to be ready to pivot to the second and third portions of your progressions and find where that open outlet is going to be. That's the next phase that we want to see here for the New York Football Giants. Just a quick, before we get out here, house cleaning note. We had mentioned when we know that Hilliard was suspended for the PEDs. He came out with his explanation. It could have been a mix-up. I ate the wrong bagel, et cetera, et cetera. He's been cut. And the Giants have brought in Austin Calitro, who had played most recently, I think, with the Bengals, 47 games, bounced around the league quite a bit. For whatever it's worth, like we said, Hilliard was going to be a bubble guy anyway. So now the Giants bring in another potential piece that can try to compete and maybe be a portion of that depth chart there. Other than that, though, man, it's been fun so far. I think we've seen some bright spots. We're pretty excited about it. And now it's just about coming back from the weekend and hopefully continuing to find some news and nuggets. August 11th, man, we're inside. We're counting down to that first opportunity to get a real-time live action look at this roster.
At the end of the day, Adam, you almost stole the thunder.
I apologize.
We're 12 days out from the
Ooh.
Giants playing the Patriots on August
Hoo-ha.
11th, as you mentioned. So there will be football with pads against another team coming up in less than 2 weeks. And so there hasn't been any pads. This is a lot of walkthroughs and scheme stuff and everybody getting comfortable with each other. We obviously can't have these turnovers by Daniel Jones. We need to see the offense continue to progress over the next week and a half, because the Patriots loom and we're going to start seeing what the fruits of the labor of all this offseason work is going to come to.
Yeah, next week I want to see I want to hear more Daniel Jones throwing the ball downfield. I want to hear if it's interceptions or otherwise. I just want to hear that they're pushing it. Push, push, push. Like, you have to try to get these reps built up as quickly as possible on both sides of the ball so we can find out where some of those position battles are going to unfold over the course of August. You get us over on YouTube, friends. You subscribe, you like it, you share it. You send a handwritten letter to your grandma. You say, why don't you go to YouTube and subscribe to the One Giant Podcast? I don't care how you do it. Get the word out there. We appreciate the support. We appreciate everyone getting into the comments. Shout out to Tuto. He just began his practice schedule out there on the pitch as well. So good luck to him. Get us on the podcast feed where we get those needs fulfilled. And as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.